Welcome back. I am here today with Dr. Tracy Debi, who is a former chiropractor turned transformational coach. She hosts the Spirit of Success podcast, and I heard Tracy's story on the Art of Slowing Down to Quantum Leap podcast with Annalena, and I immediately reached out to her because I felt as if she would have an excellent dialogue with me today, specifically about empathy burnout in the healthcare system. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So many of my listeners are slightly familiar with my story, but I'll very briefly share my story. Working in healthcare for nearly 20 years in the areas of grief and loss, death and dying, I suffered tremendous burnout, especially roughly the last 10 years of my career in healthcare. And it was very overwhelming to me. I was just constantly feeling drained, exhausted. I was picking up on many of the energies of the families. I was working in organ and tissue donation, and I was approaching families oftentimes with my coworkers, and I would begin to notice that for weeks after I was working with these families, I was still picking up on the energy, and I didn't understand what was going on. I was like, why am I not letting, some of this go? And I was feeling extraordinarily drained and beaten and battered and tired and exhausted. And it became very overwhelming for me. And not only that was I picking up on those energies of the families, I was also picking up on a lot of that, anxious, burnout, overwhelm energy from the staff as well. And when I heard your story on the Art of Slowing Down podcast, and you had shared some of your experiences that you had as a chiropractor, I really resonated with that. So could you share a little bit about that time in your life and how you began to awaken to the idea that, we are energetic beings and we are able to, pick up the energies around us?
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing your story. That's a really interesting industry to come from. I have so many questions that I want to ask you, but I will share my story as briefly as I can. So like I mentioned, I am still a chiropractor, just not practicing in the same way in the office, but I was privileged in my career to sort of treat a wide range of clientele or patients. And one of the things that I noticed really early on is that I could tell how people were feeling. So actually, ever since I was a kid, to be honest with you, I just knew how people were feeling. And I would tell my parents, I remember when I was really young, I used to say that person is just really upset. And they were like, what? And then they sort of were like, you're weird. And I just completely shut that part of my life out. And so I never really touched it again. The reason why that's relevant is because all of a sudden, as a doctor, kind of like you, I started just picking up on how people were feeling. I just knew how people were feeling. And I didn't really tell anybody because, like I said, I was that part of me I thought was gone. You know what I mean? I just never touched it again. And the experience that really changed my life was working at the Veterans Hospital in Miami, Florida. So just to give people perspective, I am a student in my last year. So I'm working under the direction of another doctor, and I get this opportunity over a bunch of other people. So we had to apply for this opportunity. So it was this very lucrative thing. So I'm all excited. I get to work at the VA, but I get to go to Florida. So I'm just excited, right?
I get it. I lived there for 20 years. I hear you.
Of course. So you get the appeal, right? I was from the north, straight to the south, and I'm from Canada. So I'm Miami. Yes, this is why I came to the school, right? For this opportunity. So I'm all excited and very naive. Okay. I've also never had family who served in any kind of military that I'm aware of. So I didn't really understand what was happening. And I treated at least 20 patients a day just on my own. A colleague of mine came down and she had 20 patients a day. So we were busy. Okay. And my colleagues are treating 3 a week. Okay. So it wasn't there was no comparison. So it was, you just got there and you were treating patients all day. Now, what surprised me was the fact that and they were generally men, I would say 95% of the patients I saw were men. What surprised me about these patients was the complexity of their cases. So they were coming to me for back pain, knee pain, neck pain, right? Those were the main three things that we saw. But we would get to see their whole health history. And they had many comorbidities was the word.
Yes.
Like the list was so long, Tanya, it was like 2 pages sometimes. Okay.
Oh.
And so I'm looking at this. I have 30 minutes to come up with a diagnosis.
Oh my goodness.
And then I realized that some of these men were sent to our physical department, like the physical therapy wing. And we had to come up with a diagnoses that would sometimes affect them getting money. So what I mean by that is the more disabled you are in the VA system, the more compensation you get, because the government's like, you served your country, and then now we can reimburse you. So there was this like 20 patients a day. And then there was, oh, by the way, your findings will contribute to whether that person gets paid or not. So
oh my gosh,
you can tell I was like, what did I sign up for? You
want to heal these people, but then you can't, because if you don't, they don't get the disability. Yeah.
Right. And then we were taught, like on the first day, it was like no bullshit at the VA. They were like, you have to do something called malingering tests, which are basically to see if people are faking symptoms or not. Because some people knew that if they had a diagnosis of back pain, so back pain, it can be up to 60%, which is one of the highest percents. So they knew that if they could fake their back pain, that they would get paid. So it was really a confusing time for me, because I'm trying to help people. And then they're also like, by the way, people are going to, your new face here, people might try to, anyway, to like fool you, but only because they just want to earn an income. There's nothing wrong with that, So it was this very strange place to be in. So I did these tests, and if 2 out of the 3 malingering tests were positive, then you had to write those down and note that I think this person's faking symptoms. And that was tough, because sometimes people were just so kind, but you also knew that they were just trying to earn money, And so I remember having this conversation with this one guy who's just the kind person, but he was faking it, and I knew it. And I would do things too, like, if I dropped my like pencil and they're like, oh ma'am, and he just picked it up and grabbed it, and he couldn't bend over earlier, and you're like, and so I just had a straight up conversation. I was like, dude, like, just what's going on? Just tell me. And then he broke down and was like, my daughter has no idea who I am, and I don't even know who she is. And I don't know how to be a father. No, I don't even know this kid. I'm supposed to bond. By the way, nobody wants to hire me because I don't know how to do anything that doesn't involve a gun. So he was like a gunnery. So he shot, and you know what I mean? Like
military, yeah.
He didn't believe that he had skills outside of his like military training. He's literally crying, being like, I can't be a good father. I can't be a good provider. What am I good for? So his wife wanted him to just earn money. And she was like, they couldn't even relate to each other anymore, and then he has PTSD. And so he was like, I just want to do one thing right. I just want to bring home an income. And I was like, oh my God.
Very eye-opening as a practitioner to hear the real story of what's going on with the patient, right?
Yeah. And so I started talking to my head doctor and being like, did you know all this? And he was like, yeah. But I only have 30 minutes with these guys, so I want to help them as best as I can. And it really changed my perspective, because he came back again and he got a trial of care, but we couldn't give him the diagnoses that he wanted. And I would see him because he became my patient. And he said, even just saying it out loud, he felt better.
Oh,
like just being able to acknowledge the truth of what was going on. He didn't have to hold this heavy burden on his heart anymore.
Yeah, that trapped
emotion. And I was like,
wow.
Whoa. And so, yeah. And then, but on an energetic level, I had no idea what was going on, because that energy was liberated in the room. But I didn't know if that sadness or that insecurity was his or mine.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? Because no one taught me about insecurity or insecurity. Oh God, no one taught me about energy. So I thought that my job was just to make people feel no pain and feel better, right? I get paid to do that. Yes. So I didn't know if they felt better at the end. I wasn't really too concerned with how that happened. I was more just like, okay, they felt better, and this is what I'm here to do. So I started learning this habit of taking on people's emotions, because they're in the room with you, then they feel better. And then there's this emotion. So it's like, if they leave it, do you take it? Do you leave it? Like, what happened?
Exactly. And you're doing that on a subconscious level. At least I was.
I was not conscious of this.
Yes. And I would sit with those grieving families and listen to their story of the loss of their loved one. And I would leave there with such severe back pain or neck pain or shoulder pain for weeks. And then this would go on, every single time with every single family or coworker or staff member. So I can completely empathize with where you're coming from.
Yeah. And I don't want to make a long story longer, but that happened. And then I started taking it on because I didn't know what else to do with the energy. So I would take it on, and I developed my own back pain. And I tried everything I was taught in school, and I got adjusted a zillion times, to the point where I was like, you need to stop adjusting me.
Yeah.
Like it's not making anything better.
Yeah.
And that's when it like hit me, like the thing you're taught, the thing you do is not helping your own back pain. Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Yeah.
So then I started researching, like, I'm missing something, this just doesn't feel good. Uh-huh. And long story short, I was guided toward Eastern practices. And Eastern practices, the baseline of all health is how you're feeling, what emotions are going through you.
Absolutely.
And I realized that is not something I was ever taught about in the Western system. It's like you almost don't even acknowledge them, right? And it was more on proprioception, which is like how your body moves in space, but not interoception. How do you feel about yourself as your body is moving through space? But I kept hearing that term, interoception, what's happening inside of you, your inner system. And acupuncture is very much based on that. And so are so many of the ancient modalities. And so I started following down that path, and it started to change my life because I started to become aware of it's what's going on inside of me. Sorry, my cat.
Oh, that's here. He likes the energy.
She just likes the energy. Yeah, she's a very energetic being. But anyway, and I just took a very different path in life. So I started going down this path, and I started understanding, wait a minute, this is happening. This is helping me. What about if I incorporate this with more patients? So I started incorporating it with patients, just talking about this stuff. And I swear to God, Tanya, I opened Pandora's box.
Yeah, you do. And that's what happened
people
to me too.
Weren't telling me.
The energy.
Yeah, right. And it's like,
Niagara
oh
Falls.
My God, seriously, right? And people are telling me all kinds of things that I've like thought I would never hear. And I started realizing, oh my God, your back pain, it has nothing to do with your back and everything to do with your financial worry, your
burden,
loveless marriage, your whatever people were telling me. And I think, and in Annalina's podcast, she was like, you have a, I don't know, whatever gate conscious son. People just tell me all of their deepest, darkest things. They just do. And that's been my whole life. And so I've heard it all. And I started realizing, oh my God, if people don't address this, they're going to continue to go to the gym to punish themselves. And then they get injured every single time. There's certain patients that would go to the gym and no matter what they did, they would be walking and somehow fall off the like treadmill and hurt themselves. And I was like, if you don't address this underlying emotional imbalance in you, you will continue to have these problems.
And that's so true, because I feel like Western medicine, we focus so much on the physical aspects, but there's so much layers to the onion, right? Like when you and I both started to study the Eastern aspects of medicine, and that's when we opened up that flow of, wow, there's an entire area of understanding, that we in Western society have no clue about.
Yes, totally. And it changed my whole world, right? Because as I said in Annalina's episode, my back pain got so bad that I was forced to, I couldn't move. I was literally on the floor. I dialed my workplace and I said, like, I can't come in today. And she was like, why? And I was like, I have this excruciating back pain. And my receptionist laughed at me.
Like, she
laughed at me. She's like,
you're not supposed
to. The chiropractor with back pain. And I've never felt so low in my whole life. And I couldn't move. And I think I talked about this on Annalina's podcast. Basically, a flip book was shown to me where and I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't say no. And I just, in that moment, everything felt so true. And I just accepted it. I was like, all of this is true.
Uh-huh.
And literally instantly, I had a spontaneous remission of my back pain. There was no pain, like none. And all I did was go to the deep root of what was going on. I didn't even know. I was completely unaware and every single time, something was shown to me, I'm like, that's true. That's true. That's true. I just accepted it all. And I was like, you know what? I can accept me being a flawed human being. I don't really care. I was so desperate. I was like, whatever. At this point, I'm just going to accept it. And then I was crying the whole time because I was like, I can't believe that this is all true. I can't believe I've done this to myself. And I was like, snotty mess. And then I got up just to get a tissue because I'm like, oh God, it's so much snot and so much tears.
I'm a mess. Yeah.
And then I realized I got up. I couldn't get up. Yes. I couldn't get up 5 minutes ago. And I was like, wait a minute. And so I'm a chiropractor. So I'm like doing all the tests to make sure that the pain's actually gone, and it's gone. And then I got really curious. I was like, wait a minute, what just happened? And so I spent like basically a year trying to figure out what happened. And that took me down the whole manifestation energy, real pathway of, oh my God, what I just did is not just a fluke. It's real. And I do not have to worry about my pain coming back. And so my pain came back a few times. I've been told I have disc problems. I've been told all kinds of things. You're going to need surgery, whatever. And I'm like, something just said no.
No, I can heal on my own. My body
I can heal on my own.
On its own.
Yeah. And so I was like, no. And now I don't have any back pain. And the beautiful thing, Tanya, is I don't worry about my back pain coming back because I deal with my emotional stuff. And so I don't worry about, and it's never really flared up. And I had knee pain. I couldn't travel because I couldn't sit on a plane because it was so painful. And I couldn't believe I'm literally traveling. Like I've gone to Europe and Hawaii. So I've done the 6 hour plus and the minus 6 hours from the Eastern time zone
on your back.
Yeah. And I was totally fine on all of these flights. And I was just like, this wasn't even a possibility for me. Literally even 2 years ago. Oh, I couldn't do this. And it's so amazing to me what opens up in your world when you just I'm not going to get that. When you just open up yourself to what's possible. Yes. So all I did was I just said there has to be a better way, and I opened myself up to literally what's possible, and amazing things happened. And it was interesting because as I was starting to do better, my patients were like, okay, my back doesn't hurt, but my relationship with my daughter, husband, mother, son, whatever is improved. They were like, dude, my life is changing better. And I was like, amazing. And then they were like, but that can't be, because you're just a chiropractor.
It's like that
paid you only like $100. Yeah. And so they were like, so then they started questioning what was happening to them. And I was like, oh no, you were literally doubting it because of the fact that you didn't pay for it. And there's no way that can actually happen. Right.
Yes.
And so it was this crazy experience for me because I was like, something has to change. Right. Like I have to do something differently because I do not want people to doubt what's happening to them just because they didn't pay for it or it's happening in this office. So that's when I knew it's time to leave.
Yeah. And gosh, Tracy, your story parallels with mine so much. And I suffered with that back pain too. And it was debilitating. I remember times I didn't want to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom because I had to crawl to the bathroom because I literally felt paralyzed. I was in so much pain that I was struggling so badly, and I would cry and cry. I'm like, this cannot be the life that I'm meant to live. Like, this is just too much. And then that's when I started to go down the avenue of learning about how our emotions affect our physical body and understanding that a lot of those deep-seated emotions that were both mine and everyone else around me that I was lovely, kind of throwing in my backpack behind me.
Yeah.
Literally
Yeah.
the backpack weighing my back down, pulling my spine, and it's funny, when I first moved out west, I had just quit my job, picked up, started a new business, moved across the country all by myself. And within 3 months, I was suffering with such debilitating back pain that I didn't know what to do. And I had gone to a chiropractor and they were doing the Atlas adjustments on me. And it threw my body into so much excruciating pain. I couldn't even get out of the chiropractor's office. I mean, and it wasn't working for me. It was very similar to your story. But what that did, it was like, all right, Tanya, you need to look somewhere else. And at this point, I was already moving forward in looking at my emotions and looking at all of the aspects of my life. But that big move, that huge quantum leap, that timeline shift that I made, my physical body was like, what the heck did you just do? What happened? And every ounce of my being just tightened up. And I was just, all I could do was lay in bed and muscle test. That's all I could do was muscle test. Is it this? Is it that? What is this? Is this an emotion? Is it a belief? Is it what is it? Is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it spiritual? Is it energetic? Literally that's all I could do. And what I did is I started to teach myself subconsciously how to heal, because I was releasing energetically every single thing that was popping up in my mind. And I had my phone there, so I would pull up Louise Hay and just read things. And okay, is it this? Is it that? I would muscle test. Boom, 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 boom. Right through everything. And I began to slowly feel the pain lift. And then one day, it was gone. And I'm like, I, like you, started to think, what did I just do? How did I make that happen? And it was, for me, I truly believe it was my subconscious. My subconscious was holding on to this program of trauma, stress, burnout for 20 plus years working in healthcare. And then I took that quantum leap, and my subconscious mind and my physical body were not in sync. They were like, whoa, we're so used to you having trauma and stress every day you wake up. And now you're relaxed and wanting to go for walks and wanting to meditate and wanting to do these things that, we're not used to this. What is happening? So the physical body it literally locked up on me. And I'm so grateful for all of the tools, that I have learned. And, throughout that experience, do I want to go back to that pain? No. However, like you probably can really empathize with your clients or your patients that come in, because you do know what that pain feels like. And how desperate you are to just find something to relieve, that pain. And I got to the point, I was so desperate, and I'm not one to do drugs. That was not in my pool house, I was like, no, I'm healing this baby naturally. This is not happening. But, it was tough. And that was a tough 4 months for me. So I can really empathize with your story, very much so.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I think it's so important to address too. Like, I'm not anti-chiropractic,
Yes.
like you can hear my story and be like, oh my God, do you even believe in chiropractic? I do. I think that it's about a balance. So like you said, people need relief, right? And chiropractic can offer that. I'm just an and person. So I'm like, and I also want you to start to address the fact that you can get adjusted every day, or like every week for, for a whole year. But if you don't change anything behaviorally, then nothing changes. And so I'm okay with you getting adjusted, and also creating a plan to address what's going on deeper. And like, I can go to the deepest level with someone, and I also, don't have to. And so I would start out and just meet people where they were at, like you said, better. And one of the therapies that I started really encouraging people to like do was 2 things, was an Epsom salt bath.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Because I just wanted people to yeah, but even Tanya, it went beyond that, because something that I realized is that people were so stressed out that they would actually take that same attitude of stress to their healing.
Yes.
And one thing that one mentor told me that was like so vivid in my mind, he's like, you cannot heal in the same environment you got ill in.
Yes.
And for some reason, it rang in my head very loudly. Like, people are taking the same thing that had worked for them, which is stress, and it works to a certain degree. And they were now trying to apply that to healing. And I'm like, dude, it's like the first rule where you cannot do the get being. And again, a really wise mentor said, get them to take a bath. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, if you get them to take a bath, it changes their state. But then there's so many other benefits, as you said, right? And the like biggest one being that their fluids in their body start moving so that they can literally heal.
Yes.
You know? Because so many people had this like low level swelling in their body, and they weren't even aware of it. And so if there was edema, which is like the fancy word for swelling near an area where they had pain, you can adjust that all you want, but they're never going to heal.
Yes.
They're never going to be able to recover. There's not enough energy there. So then I would work on that first before we even did any kind of adjusting. So it's a very different way of approaching that. But I would give everybody an Epsom salt bath as a recommendation, because I was like, you have to change your state. If you're not relaxed, you won't heal. And surprisingly, the people who actually did it got significantly better. And it wasn't because the bath is super healing. I truly think it's because the state changed, because they were actually relaxed.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's fantastic.
And then the other thing I would give,
so simple and so inexpensive.
So simple. And I would give people that education piece too. Like, I want you to understand, like, if you're stressed out all day and then you go home and you're stressed, your cells are like, dude, how can we help you if all we know is stress? And the people were like, whoa, you're right, that isn't going to work. And they would try and they'd be like, yeah, okay, it's not working. And I'd be like, are you ready to try a different way now? And they're like, yeah. And it was more so just planting a seed there, just to help people be aware. And so many of my patients would tell me, you know, afterwards, I'm so glad you told me that, because now that is ringing in my head. And I tell people, like, do you know that you can't heal in the same environment you got ill in? And I'm like, okay, great. I want people to know this.
And that's why people feel so good when they're on vacation, right? Because when you take time and you go on vacation for a week or 2 or 3, oftentimes your immune, this would always happen to me. I'd be so stressed out at work and I'd take off a 2-week vacation, then I get sick. And I was like, oh man, you know, what is happening? And it was because my body shifted and my immune system started to lower. However, I was still holding on to that environment. But then as time went on throughout my vacation, I would notice, gosh, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better. It was usually that first 2 or 3 days I would feel a little yucky, but then it was like my body's way of detoxing and shifting. And then after that 3rd day, I felt fantastic. But then I didn't want to go back to work when I came back. It was like, oh, I don't want to go back into that environment. But it's so right. When you shift that environment, it allows your body to have a different type of flow in it. And the energy shifts and your mind shifts too. You're like, okay, I can finally, you know, and I would tell people, go on vacation for more than a week, because that first week, your body is really just trying to release all of the stress and all of the overwhelm that it's been experiencing. And then by that 2nd week, you start to feel wonderful, you know, and then you're like, oh my goodness, what have I been missing all along? My back pain isn't here anymore. My knee doesn't hurt anymore. And a lot of times it could be you're going to the ocean. Yeah. You're swimming in the ocean, or you're in the mountains, you're hiking, you're spending time in nature. The nature is so healing. And that was an experience I share. I actually experienced myself, and I share with my clients as well. Shift your environment.
Yeah. And it's like, your outer becomes your inner, right? So your cells inside of your body need a different environment too. So if you can shift your external one, right, you're also shifting your internal environment, because you're not seeing the same people who push the same triggers,
Yes.
for you every single day. And you're not in that same in environment. So you don't even have to go to a beach or like ocean. If you do, that's bonus, right?
Yes,
But
totally.
if you can literally disconnect from that environment that causes stress to help yourself get stronger, then you can learn to strengthen from the inside out, right? So that's my approach to what has worked for me. And I just want to quickly add, the other thing that I would get my patients to like do, because I did say two things,
Yeah, no,
was I would get them to dance.
Yes.
I would literally get them to dance, and they're like, what? And I'm like, okay, what's your favorite song ever? And they were like, and then they would tell me, and I had Spotify, and I would just play it and we would just start dancing. And they were like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, it's the whole environment again,
It is.
right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So I just want to tell people it can be as amazing as going on a trip, but it can be as simple as dancing.
Yes.
Because when you're dancing, you're not thinking and you're just expressing joy, and your body is getting different information when you do that. And that is what's going to help you put off things like never experience burnout. Right? If you just do these things more and more and more. And so I tell people I've danced my way to health, like I'm serious about it. I dance all the time, and I'm a huge fan of it because it's one of the most ancient things too. Like the tribes way back in the day, guess what they did? They would dance. It's a form of gratitude. It's a form of healing. And so people don't have to know that. I don't care if they know that. I'm like, just engage with it.
Definitely. And not only that, when you dance, you raise your vibration, because like you said, you tap into that joy frequency. And I personally believe that viruses and pain and suffering is in a low vibrational state. You're holding more emotions that hold you into a denser energy, a lower vibrational energy. And when you do things that bring you back to your childlike nature, you raise your frequency and you raise your vibration, which then will put you in those joyful, blissful, heightened emotions. And you are not resonating in the frequency of pain and suffering and sadness and, all those really dense, heavy emotions. So just doing little things that, you used to do as a child. I even told a client, I asked him, what did you used to do as a child? He goes, you know what, Tanya, I actually used to get on my side and roll down a hill in the grass. And I said, okay, do you have a hill that you can go to and roll in the grass? And he was like, are you serious? Like, I said, this is going to be your homework. Like, seriously, I want you to go roll down a hill in the grass. And he texted me the next day and said, you have no idea how good that felt. And I knew it was going to be two-sided. It would be something fun for him to do that he would bring back his childhood joy, but it also would tune him into the Schumann resonance, the natural Earth's frequency, which is in tune with our human brain, our natural brainwave state. So, and it was so funny because he's like, I just felt like I let everything go. And I laughed and I cried. He goes, it was the craziest experience, but it was something that I really felt my body needed. And it was so silly. And he said no one was around, so he did it, on his own, but he really enjoyed that. So I often will tell people, just name one thing you used to do as a child and go do that. Dancing, singing, jumping on a trampoline, whatever it is, go do that,
Yes. And I think that I think that you're so right. And I'm so glad that your client actually did it, because it takes courage to do something that your brain's like, but I think that that's so awesome. And I love that you understand where this is all coming from. And what's crazy is that there's science to actually prove what you're saying is true. There's like Dr. Joe Dispenza has literal scientific research that shows advanced meditators literally don't get COVID. When they expose their plasma of their blood to COVID, none of it enters the cell.
Fantastic.
But if you take control subjects, all of them get it. And it's actually nuts. And this is like a scientific paper that was released not long ago. And so now we literally have proof of this is not just a concept or a theory. It's literally actual practice. If you can go within and not be influenced by your environment, it works at a microscopic level and a macroscopic level. It doesn't matter, which I think is really, really cool. It's something for all of us to really consider.
Gosh, and that's fascinating. And also too, Dr. Bruce Lipton, I love Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton. He talks about epigenetics, right? Our ability to change our physical body will shift with our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and intentions. So when we shift that energetic frequency, it will also shift our physical, our DNA, literally, change our DNA through that subconscious programming. And this is all scientifically based. And I have a feeling we'll probably get some healthcare workers who are very scientifically based watching, or listening to this podcast or program. And I encourage you, go out and research Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden. He is fantastic as well. And they all have scientific backing to everything that Tracy and I are saying right now, So yes, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's so pertinent. And that's also tapping into that Eastern medicine and understanding there's so much more to us than just this physical body that we are living in.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add too, like I personally did my own health measurements. So I would get my blood checked for certain markers of disease. And literally after just 6 weeks of doing my own deep work and I changed my diet, I got retested, and the guy who was testing me was like, "This is incredible. I have no idea how you were able to do this." And it was like, because I've just done the inner work, not just the outer work. I paired them. So I didn't just change my diet, and I didn't even go vegan. I just took certain things out of my diet, and I did such a deep work on me, on my programming, on my beliefs. And literally I have my own proof, right? Of well, all these things changed in your body in 6 weeks, which is incredible for me. So as a doctor, I'm like, okay, well now I always tell my patients this: I'm going to put myself through it first. I'm going to go experiment on myself before I talk about anything. I won't tell you something if I haven't done it. And if I do talk about it, I will tell you I haven't done it.
Yes.
But I've literally done all kinds of different things because I want to be able to talk about it. So I did ayahuasca in July, which was a total game changer. And I'm doing Dr. Joe Dispenza's advanced retreat in a few weeks.
Fantastic.
So I'm literally putting myself through it because I want to be able to not only be the example, but also talk about it from experience.
In your own personal perspective. And Tracy, I think that is so crucial with, whether you're a practitioner or a healer or whatever you resonate with. It's so crucial to be able to go through it yourself, so that way you can empathize and you can share your story on a level that is genuine and authentic. Because, you can sit there and say, I know how to teach people how to lose weight, but if you've never been overweight, then how can you really empathize with people who are going through that, or whatever situation it is? So I love that you brought that up, because I truly do feel that, as practitioners, it's so important for us to go through what our patients and clients go through, so that way we can share our own personal experience and perspective with them. And then also, listen to their perspective and experience as well.
Yeah. And then as you said too, a part of the work that both of us do is really deep healing work. And so a huge part of it is compassion, having compassion and curiosity as you navigate your own inner world. I think a lot of my clients are like, well, I can't open my heart. I'm afraid to feel those things. And it's like, well, what have you been feeling? If you haven't been feeling joy, or if you haven't been feeling love, then, what have you been feeling? What have you been experiencing? And that's such a huge key. If you're not kind and compassionate to yourself, and then also curious, I'm just naturally curious. But also I take that curiosity with me when I go inwards. And even with my clients, I really encourage them to have those two basic tools first, because I had to experience and learn that through burnout.
Yes.
I had to literally get so low that I was like, I don't feel like myself. And then I could actually observe myself for the first time. And so as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, why wait till burnout? why not get to that elevated place where you can look at yourself and be like, and then not wait till burnout. And to be honest with you, something I learned going through burnout is that you back yourself into this corner, and then you need so many resources to just get yourself back to neutral. And it's not just one person, you need many people. And so if you just try to put the burden on like one person, you like pass the burnout on. If you just try to, expect your like spouse or like partner to save you,
I call
right?
that
Because you
garbage
need
dumpers.
help, right? Exactly, right? And so and then you feel like, oh, I can't ask for help, or I don't deserve help. And like burnout's such a weird mental place to be in, because you're like, well, I need help, but I'm afraid to ask for help. But if I don't get help, something bad's going to happen to me. So it's like, it's such a negative place, and the spirals that happen there are so, they just don't need to happen. I think my biggest message, that if anyone takes anything away from this, it's like, ask for help, and then make sure you attract people that will help you never get to that point again. If
and
they
don't
just give
feel
you
guilty
Band-Aid
about it.
solutions.
Yeah,
And don't feel guilty about it, and like just know that this is okay, but learn from it. I just don't think that we can have as many people going through burnout that are going through it right now, because I don't think that the current system can handle it.
I agree. And it's, gosh, I mean, when I got out of the system 5 years ago, I was experiencing tremendous burnout. I can't imagine what people are going through now after the virus and all of this turmoil, going on in the world. I can only imagine how amplified it is for people right now. And I love that, how you said that, you're backed in a corner and you don't know what to do. It's like you're in a room that's dark and you can't see the light. You're just like, I'm so underwater. I'm so stuck. And all you need to do is reach out a hand. That's all you need to do. But when you reach out a hand to other people who are burnt out as well, you're just passing the torch, right? So you need to reach out a hand to people who are, have worked through that burnout and have an understanding of tips and tools to help you work through that burnout as well. People like Tracy and I, right?
Yeah. And it's true, because when you reach out to someone else who's also going through burnout, it's like, then there's more guilt.
Yes.
Right? Then you actually just take on more guilt, but then they also have more guilt because you don't have energy. What I want people to know is, when you take on emotions that aren't yours, or when you don't process your own, it's actually an energy consumer, because your body is trying to process those things. But if you're not consciously trying to process your own stuff, it's more energy to hold it and not process it. And if you're taking on someone else's things, you can't process theirs. So then you're just holding it either way. And it's so much, people don't realize how much energy it is to just hold on to things, like cling on to them without letting them go or processing them. And I think if people were aware of what that actually is costing them, they would be really curious about how to be proactive about that. And this is an ongoing thing. Like, Tanya and I are not perfect. We have to employ all of the practices that we learn all of the time. It's just to a deeper level, and one thing that I've learned is there's a term called frequency matching. So something I was taught that matching someone's state. So if somebody was sad, I would drop my frequency to match them and be sad, because I thought that was compassion or that was empathy. The problem was, I was in a very small room with people. So if I'm not sad, but I become sad and they leave their sadness, I would take that. And then my brain is like, well, I'm going to flash you a time when you were sad. And now you're going to think you're actually sad. I'm going to remind you of that, but I can't process the sadness because it was never mine. And that person doesn't know why they feel like empty, and they have no idea what's going on. It's because they left their sadness in the room. And so frequency matching is actually one of the most detrimental things, because we can't always choose who we work with or who's going to be in rooms that we're in. But if we frequency match, it's going to be a big problem, because we're not going to understand if you go to 3 different places and you don't know where something came from, you have no idea, then you'll start to believe it's yours.
Yes.
And it'll start to just be in your frequency, and there's nothing you can do about it other than let it go. But if you're not even aware of what's there, you can't let it go.
very true. And I think until you understand that we are all energy, frequency, and vibration, which was part of my awakening process during that burnout time,
Yes.
right? You don't really even know that you are picking up, I call it, we're like human Velcros, right? You're like walking around, just everything is attaching. I felt like, I would meditate and clear my energy before I'd go into the hospital. And then by the end of the day, I felt so weighed down because I literally was doing what you just said. I was frequency matching with all of these people, whether it be stress or grief, sadness, frustration, whatever it was. And by the time I left the hospital, I had magnetized so many of those emotions to me that I got home, I didn't even know what was mine. So I started to learn a clear out script that I would say every time I left the hospital. I'd sit in my car and literally read this thing out loud. And it was basically just to clear out my energy. But what I was doing was reprogramming my subconscious, mind at the time. And then I, got to the point where I was visualizing this energetic bubble around me where, only my emotions could come in and out of it freely, but I could not, attract other people's. I could be there with them and empathize with them, but I wasn't carrying, all of their stuff, because when I was carrying people's grief, I was enabling them, because really what I was doing was taking that grief away from them and not allowing them to process their own grief. So once I started to learn I was carrying it, I would start sending it back with love. And, I would kind of transmute it on my own, send it back with love and healing, and allow them to journey on through their process, because their soul signed up to go through that, unfortunately. And for me, it was a learning experience as to, why am I feeling such deep sorrow? And the funny thing, Tracy, is I never even experienced death or loss within my family at this time. I had never been close to it, but why was I feeling such deep grief and sorrow? It was because I was frequency matching. And I love that concept. I'd never heard of it that way, but I love that. And that's exactly what I was doing. And I feel a lot of people working in the healthcare industry are doing that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just a faulty program. It's just the way it was taught. Right? Like the only way you can show compassion is to do that. And something that I've actually heard of during this whole pandemic period is compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same thing. It's you frequency match to a point where you're like, who am I anymore? I don't even know, because am I this sorrow? And you don't know who you are. You lose your sense of self because you've matched so many times that your body's like, I don't even know who I am anymore. You take on all these things that don't belong to you. And like you said, it's actually a detriment to the other person, because that is theirs to process and figure out what their gift is. So my physical pain ended up being my greatest teacher, because it taught me these things about me. I didn't know I didn't set boundaries. Like I didn't even know that was a thing until I was shown that, hey, you didn't this and you didn't do that. And that is my gift. But if I had given my pain away to someone else, I wouldn't have had that as well. So I love that you bring that up, because something I would do between patients was just release the energy through my hands to the ground.
Yeah.
Actually, a nurse taught me that. Mm-hmm. And so I would do that, and it would ground me, but it would also send the energy down. And then something I just did was to become aware of how I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. Like before every patient in my charts, I would actually write down how I was feeling.
Yeah, that's a great
idea.
And
then what I picked up in the room. And that was my reprogramming of my subconscious.
Yeah.
Be aware of how you feel. Be aware of what came into that room. And then ask that person, like, hey, what's going on? Are you grieving something? And they were like, what?
How do you know that?
And like all this interesting stuff would come up from that, And so I just want to tell people that what we're talking about, the actual practice, because you do have to put in a practice. This is not like a quick fix. I did talk about a spontaneous healing, but it was because I had put certain things into practice is worth it.
Yes.
Because
and I love
if
that.
you're in healthcare right now.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Yeah. I was going to say, if you're in healthcare, we need you to be at your best.
Yes.
We absolutely need you to be at your best. And so self-care, or whatever you want to call it, you can call it anything you want. That is what is needed as an education. And so at the time when I had my burnout, podcasts like this one didn't exist.
Yes.
And there wasn't as much information. I had to literally search through a book and through the internet to find things. And so now there's so much more awareness. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I think I'm burned out,
Yeah.
or I think I'm heading down that very one-way path to burnout, I want you to know that you could stop, look left, look right, and reach out to somebody, one of us, to help you, because I do not want you to go through what we went through. And I also want you to have tools to be an example for your coworkers, that it doesn't have to look like this either. You don't have to be so tired at the end of the day. You don't have to be burnt out. You can actually be neutral and even happy after doing your work. It is possible. And I just want you to know that it is possible,
It is. And I love that. That's a great segue into, if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to contact you? How, if someone is struggling with this and they want to connect, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So I would say that the easiest way is you can find me on Instagram. So I'm Dr. Tracy Debi, TracyDebi. Also, my website is drtracydebi.com. You can contact me there. I would be really happy to help you and just teach you all the things that I've learned. Like I said, it's evolved what I've learned too. So things I give people a better way, because you are always finding better ways. And so I'm just really happy to help people with the full expression of who I am, honoring the full expression of who they are as well, which just brings me so much joy.
I love that. I love that. And this was such a compelling talk. I feel like we could go on for hours about all these different subjects.
I know.
I think, but it's been about an hour, so I'm going to probably cut it, but thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you out there listening, if you are struggling with burnout, then, these are areas that I do discuss on this podcast. So, reach out to people, get out there, because like Tracy said, oftentimes our pain is our biggest teacher. And there's a reason why you could be going through this burnout. And if you are not going through burnout, then be proactive and start doing some of these tips and tools that we have shared with you in this podcast. And these are not the end all be all. There's so many tools, techniques, and tips that you can utilize. And I'm sure with each of, working with Tracy or myself, we can share with you all the tools and tips that we've learned to overcome our own empathy, burnout, or compassion fatigue that we have both gone through, throughout our own personal healing journey.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's so true.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tracy. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone.